The world watched tonight, holding its breath. Former President Donald Trump, a figure who has long dominated headlines with his powerful and often unpredictable statements, unleashed a torrent of criticism from his social media platform aimed squarely at America's northern neighbor. He declared Canada's recent trade actions a total betrayal and an attack on the American worker. His words were sharp, designed to pressure and to command a response. He demanded that Canada immediately reverse its new tariffs, promising that if they did not. But across the world's longest undefended border, the response was not one of fear or immediate surrender. In a nation long accustomed to being a quiet, steadfast ally, the initial shock quickly hardened into a steely resolve. Instead, Canada stood firm. This wasn't just another trade squabble. For many Canadians, it felt like a fundamental challenge to their national identity and sovereignty. A quiet determination rippled through the country, from the halls of power to the streets of its cities. The message was clear. Canada would not be bullied. The government in Ottawa did not back down. Behind closed doors, strategists worked around the clock, gaming out every possible scenario. Publicly, officials communicated a clear and simple message rooted in international law and the principle of reciprocity. They weren't just rejecting the American demands, they were preparing a meticulous dollar-for-dollar retaliatory response carefully designed to exert maximum political pressure on key sectors within the United States. It was a high-stakes diplomatic chess match, and Canada was signaling it was ready to play. In the middle of this heated dispute, as politicians traded barbs, a new and powerful voice emerged from outside the immediate political fray. It was a voice that commanded attention not through rhetoric, but through deep, unimpeachable authority in the complex world of global economics. That voice belonged to Mark Carney. Carney is a highly respected figure in the world of global finance, one of the few individuals to have headed the central banks of two different G7 nations. He had steered economies through global recessions and financial crises. He is not a politician, but a technocrat whose pronouncements are based on data, not ideology. When he speaks, markets listen, and governments take note. His intervention shifted the entire frame of the debate. What shocked many American observers was not just that Carney spoke, but what he said and how he said it. There was no anger, no patriotic bluster. Instead, with the calm precision of a surgeon, he laid out a clinical and devastating economic case. He wasn't just defending Canada, he was delivering a lecture on the self-inflicted wounds of protectionism in a deeply interconnected world. He calmly explained that the United States tariffs would ultimately hurt the American economy more than the Canadian one. Carney detailed the intricate cross-border supply chains, especially in the auto industry, where a single component might cross the border 6 or 7 times before a car is finished. A tariff, he argued, wasn't a single tax, but a cascading penalty that would cripple efficiency and drive up prices for American consumers. He pointed out that Canada's planned retaliation was not random, but surgically targeted at sensitive political districts in the U.S., turning a foreign policy dispute into a domestic political problem for Washington. In essence, Carney's message was a stark warning. In this economic war, the first casualties would be on the American side of the border. To truly grasp the scale of this escalating conflict, we must first dissect its primary weapon, the tariff. In its simplest form, a tariff is a tax levied on goods imported from another country. But its purpose is rarely simple. Historically, tariffs have been used as a tool for protectionism, a shield to protect a nation's domestic industries from foreign competition by making imported goods more expensive. They can also be a source of government revenue. In the modern geopolitical landscape, however, they are increasingly wielded as a cudgel, a powerful instrument of economic statecraft designed to pressure and penalize other nations. The current dispute ignited when the United States administration, citing national security concerns under a rarely used provision of trade law, announced staggering new tariffs, 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum, targeting multiple countries, including its closest ally, Canada. This was swiftly followed by steep duties on Canadian softwood lumber, reigniting a decades-old battle. For Canada, a nation whose economy is deeply intertwined with its southern neighbor, these were not just policy announcements, they were economic shockwaves, perceived as a direct assault on foundational industries. The numbers are staggering. Every single day, more than $2 billion in goods and services flows across the 49th parallel. But this figure doesn't capture the true complexity. The two economies are not just connected, they are profoundly integrated. Consider the auto industry. A single component may cross the border 6 or 7 times, moving between specialized plants in Ontario and Michigan before it finds its place in a finished vehicle. This intricate dance of logistics, perfected over decades under trade agreements like NAFTA, has created one of the most efficient cross-border manufacturing ecosystems in the world. These tariffs threaten to grind that delicate machinery to a halt. Beyond manufacturing, there is the critical artery of energy. Canada is, by a significant margin, the largest and most reliable supplier of energy to the United States. This isn't just a little extra fuel, it's a cornerstone of American energy security. Millions of barrels of oil, billions of cubic feet of natural gas, and a steady flow of hydroelectricity move south daily through a vast network of pipelines and transmission lines. This strategic partnership insulates the U.S. from volatile overseas markets. The imposition of broad trade restrictions puts this stable, secure energy relationship into an uncertain new light. For most people, arcane discussions of trade policy and tariff schedules can feel distant and abstract. But the consequences of this trade war are not confined to boardrooms and government offices. They are beginning to ripple outwards, hitting the wallets of ordinary families. The cost of the tariff is rarely absorbed by the importer alone. Instead, it's passed down the supply chain, from the manufacturer to the distributor to the retailer and finally to the consumer. Suddenly the price of a new appliance, a six-pack of beer, or even a can of soup, starts to creep upwards. These are the real, tangible effects that families are starting to notice. Nowhere is this pain more acute than in the construction sector. Anyone building a deck, renovating a kitchen, or constructing a new home is facing a major headache. The tariff on Canadian softwood lumber, a key material in North American home building, has caused prices to skyrocket. This adds thousands of dollars to the cost of an average single-family home, pushing the dream of homeownership further out of reach for many. For small and medium-sized contractors, it's a crisis. They are caught between fixed-price contracts and soaring material costs, squeezing their margins and threatening their very survival. Projects are being delayed or canceled, creating a chilling effect across the entire housing market. The relationship between the United States and Canada has long been described as a special relationship, a cornerstone of North American stability. This current conflict is shaking that very foundation. The strong language has created a level of tension not seen in generations. In cities across Canada, shoppers are seeing higher prices on American products. These small changes add up. The conflict is changing how people feel about their neighbors, turning friendly neighbors into economic rivals. We are now at a critical moment. The path forward is uncertain with several possible outcomes, none easy. One path is continued escalation, a trade war with devastating consequences for workers and consumers. Another is a prolonged stalemate, a new normal of friction that chills investment and erodes trust. The third, and most difficult path, is one of reconciliation. Each choice carries immense weight, not just for North America but for the stability of the global order. The world is watching to see if this cornerstone alliance will crack under pressure. A more hopeful path involves de-escalation and negotiation. This requires more than a photo op. It demands painstaking work by diplomats to identify core interests, not just public demands. For real progress, leaders must offer their counterparts a way to save face, presenting any compromise as a victory. This requires stepping back from aggressive rhetoric and the politics of grievance, a tall order in today's polarized environment. It is a test of statesmanship, not just strength. This dispute has served as a wake-up call, showing how vulnerable both countries are to sudden policy shifts. For decades, the U.S. and Canadian economies became a single, integrated entity. The auto industry is a prime example, with parts crossing the border multiple times before a single car is finished. This dispute exposed that integration not as a strength but as a critical vulnerability. A single tariff can disrupt just-in-time supply chains, idling factories in Ontario and Ohio alike. The shockwaves have revealed how fragile the foundations of this shared prosperity have become. Ultimately, this conflict is a profound test of a historic friendship built over more than a century of cooperation. This isn't just an economic partnership, it's an alliance forged in shared sacrifice. We see it in the joint defense of the continent through NORAD, a pact born from Cold War anxieties. We see it in the monumental St. Lawrence Seaway, which turned inland cities into global ports. And we remember it in the quiet solidarity after 9/11. This deep well of goodwill has always been the alliance's greatest asset. The question now is whether that foundation is strong enough to withstand the political storms of the present. The choices made in the coming weeks will determine whether this is just a difficult chapter or the beginning of a new era of mistrust. One future sees this as a stress test that leads to a stronger, more resilient partnership, but the other, darker path leads to a permanent state of friction, a future of retaliatory tariffs, and a strategic decoupling that would leave North America fractured and diminished on a world stage. The future of the North American alliance hangs in the balance, waiting for wisdom and leadership to prevail over anger and pride.